Welcome to Mr. News Art Class. It's wonderful to see your smiling faces. In our last lesson, we started our series about the master artists by talking about the very first artists, cave painters. We know about the artwork that those cavemen made inside their caves because inside their cave it was kept safe from the elements. We don't know whether cavemen made art in other places outside of the cave. We don't know, because if they did, the weather and the elements and things would have destroyed that artwork a long time ago. But today, we're going to talk about an artist who definitely did paint outdoors, outside, out in nature. Claude Monet was the first Impressionist painter. And in fact, the term Impressionism comes from one of his paintings titled Impression Sunrise. Take a moment to study this painting carefully, analyze it, look at what you see, think about it carefully and critically. And if you have a friend to talk to them about what they see too. This painting was made early in the morning as Claude Monet looked out across the foggy bay. In the foreground, we see a few fishing boats coming out for their first catch of the day. Beyond them in the distance, we can barely make out the masts of larger ships that haven't even yet left the docks. The orange sun and the clouds are reflected on the water. Notice that all the colors are very faint and faded, and this enhances the feeling of fog covering the bay. It also brightens the morning light. Notice that the blues and greens of the sky and ocean are reflected back up into the fishermen and the distant ships. Monet wasn't trying to get every detail. He was only trying to give you a very quick impression of what he was looking at. He was mostly focused on how light and dark and color played against the human eye and the human brain. Today, we're going to do our best to try to recreate this painting. Let's get started. For starters, make sure you have your paper labeled. This is the way we label our papers in my art classroom: your name, your teacher, and your grade. That goes on the back. And make sure you have all the supplies you need. We need a paint tray, watercolor paint tray with a brush, some kind of rag or paper towel to help manage your water, and of course, a small cup of water. No need for a whole large cup, a small little cup will do. Now for starters, the first thing we always do when we're working with watercolors is we wet our brush, make sure that there are no bristles falling off of it. This is a brand new brush, and sometimes with brand new brushes, you got little hairs falling out. So we've wet our brush, dry our brush, and analyze the page and kind of start off with a plan for what's going to happen where. We obviously need mostly blue wash over the entire page for the sky and the water. Right at the horizon, there's going to be a lot of darker shapes that are going to be situated that are like the ships that are still docked in the bay. There's going to be a couple of little fishing boats along this way. There's going to be lots of little strokes in the ocean to show the texture of the waves. There's going to be an orange or red sun right just to the right of center in the sky. And there's going to be a warm orange tone to the sky up in the top. So for starters, let's get our brush dripping wet. Dripping wet brush, just kind of barely touch the blue and spread across your page. When it stops spreading, soaking wet brush, little bit of blue, spread across the page, and just keep going with that. Soaking wet brush, little bit of blue, spread it out. We're not trying to stir the blue up, just dunk your brush in the water, touch the blue, and spread it out. Dunk it, touch it, spread it out. Dunk it, touch it, spread it out. This is what we call a wash. We're trying to get the whole page covered in a light wash of blue. We're not worried if there are spots that are a little darker, spots that are a little lighter. That's fine. We're just trying to get the whole thing spread out with blue. And a light blue, not a dark blue. So we don't need to stir the blue paint up. If you stir it up, then it'll just get darker. That's not what we want. We want to just touch it and go. Dunk it, touch it, and go. Dunk it, touch it, and go. Well, I might have stirred a little too much there. Dunk it, touch it, go. As we do this, you can see there is a puddle forming inside that blue tray, which is fine for our needs. We are actually going to use that later to our advantage. But we're going to start off with just a light wash. And there, once we have finished a light blue wash across the entire page, now it's time to start thinking about blocking in some of these shapes in the middle, at the horizon, blocking in some of the areas of warm orangey tone in the sky, things like that. So what I'm going to do is, while my brush only has a little bit of blue on it, I'm going to wash it in the cup, get it clean, and I'm going to grab some of this orange and start adding that right on top of the blue wash up in the top half of the sky. And I'm doing this in kind of the same way I did the blue. It's dunk it, stir it just a little bit, and wash it on. And you see how that's kind of blending in with the blue and just warming up the sky. You don't want this all over the whole page. In fact, you don't even want it over the whole sky, most of the sky, but leave some of the sky more blue. In fact, I might even do this with a little bit of brown. See, in my paint tray here, the brown is the one next to purple. Sometimes it's hard to tell the difference between the black and the brown. But again, I don't want much of that brown. I just want to stir it just tiny bit. Just this is just to darken up a little patches of the sky where it's where that orange warmth of the sky is mixing with the blue of the sky, and it's making sort of dark patches. I kind of want to do some of the same with both the orange and the browns down on the water as well, because the color of the sky is going to be reflecting onto the water, but I don't want to overdo it down here in the water. So I'm going to get a little bit of that orange, spread it out, a little bit of orange, spread it out. little bit of that brown, spread it out. Again, trying not to make any patches that are too dark. And now it's time to start blocking in these shapes across the horizon. We see very faintly, we see some distant ships that are still at their docks, and they all kind of conglomerate into large shapes because they're so far away and they're foggy. And well, the way I'm going to do this is I've already been creating a puddle in my blue paint over here. What I want to do is wash my brush, get any of those oranges and browns out of it, and then dry my brush, and then take some of this blue that's already here, kind of stir it up, and use that as a darker blue since I'm stirring it up. I don't even have to go to the water. I just go straight into that puddle of blue. And I guess I'll start with just a horizon across, and then I'll kind of block in some of these shapes. Now, there's no real rhyme or reason to these shapes, except to notice that there are some masts, like tall masts of ships. There's some of those are sort of at an angle. Some of them are taller, some of them are shorter. And all the different bodies of the ships just kind of blend together into one big haze. And same over here. There's at least one where you can see sails starting to unfurl. Again, I'm just going straight into this blue. I'm not even touching the water. I've already got plenty of water in this blue here. There's also going to be a lot of these blue strokes in the ocean, in the water, giving it that wavy texture. And again, I'm doing all of this without ever going back to the water. The blue paint has plenty of water already in it. These shapes in the middle are not dark enough, so I need to grab either some of the brown or some of the black. And I think what I'm going to do is, instead of going to the water and then to the black and then to the page, I think what I'm going to do is pick up some of this blue, which is, there's a puddle there, so it's wet, and put that into the black and stir it up. Again, use this as my puddle of water to get my brush wet. Stir it into the black. That just gives me a nice dark blue. I'm going to get this puddle of blue water, stir it into the black. And again, these shapes do not have to be perfect or exact in any way. They are intended to be fuzzy and kind of broken up. And that's because it is a foggy morning. And if there are dark patches and light patches, that's normal, that's expected, that's fine. Now, I do want to wash off that black from my brush, the black and blue from my brush before I move on. The next thing I'm going to do is create the sun and its reflection. So to create the sun, I want a clean, partly dried brush. I'm going to wipe onto the side of the cup here to get excess water off so that I have a wet brush, but not too terribly wet. And I want to stir that in the red. The more I stir it up, the deeper that red color is going to be. And then I just want to barely touch some of that orange where it's already wet. So that'll mix with my red. And place the sun as a nice circle right there above some of those ships. While my brush still has that color in it, I'm going to come down straight down from the sun and make these strokes that are the reflection of that sunlight. And I want some of that to be even brighter too, so I'm going to wash my brush, dry my brush, and use some of this orange that's already here. It's already wet from when we warmed up the sky. Use some of that. This gets the reflection of the sun on the ocean there. And while I'm worried about these strokes that show the wavy texture of the water there, I also want to fill in some darker patches of the water. So I'm going to wet my brush, get it mostly dry off of the side of the cup there, grab a little bit of black, make some of these strokes. Now that black does have some of the blue mixed into it, so it's actually kind of turning out a little bit greenish, which is fine. That's because earlier I was mixing the blue directly into the black, and that is fine. That is absolutely fine. Once I've got enough texture into the ocean down here, I want to add in a couple of fishing boats. And the way that I'm going to do that is use a mostly dry brush. So I'm going to wash my brush. I'm going to dry my brush on the side of the cup, but not on the paper towel or rag. Just get it the extra water off, but it's still a wet brush. Stir up a little bit of the blue. And there's going to be 3 fishing boats kind of spaced out like this. And the one where my pointer finger is, that's going to be the one closest to us, so it's going to be biggest. And then the next one's going to be smaller, and then the next one's going to be even smaller. And so I'm going to start with this distant one. Is going to be, it's almost going to look like just another stroke of the ocean, but there's going to be a couple of little heads poking out, maybe a fishing line. There's an up close of that fishing boat. You can see there's very little detail to it at all. And for the second one, I'm going to do the same thing. Grab some of my blue with a mostly dry brush. Make this one a little bit bigger. And for the third one, again, the same thing. Grab some of my blue. Make this one a bit bigger, and this one's going to be kind of overlapping. In my case, in the original, it doesn't, but in my case it is. It's overlapping this reflection of the sun. That's fine. Here I see a little bit more detail, so I see the body of a person, the head of a person, and then very gently a line for like a fishing line, or maybe it's an oar that they are putting down into to the ocean. Maybe there's a little body of another person who's sitting down and a head. I'm taking a little bit more time to put in a little bit more detail with this one because it's closer, but even so, it's very faint. There's no real detail whatsoever. Now, this one that's closest to us is going to be the darkest. So I need to grab some of this black, or I could use some of the brown. I might use both actually, and just add it right on top of the blue that we've already put there. I'm doing this with a mostly dry brush so that I can get detail. Again, for this boat here, kind of darken it up a little bit. Let that one be more faded into the surroundings. That one is perfect. This one I don't think is dark enough. So what I'm going to do is wash my brush, get it mostly dry, and really stir up this black. Just really stir it up. The more you stir it, the darker it'll get. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's going to be perfect. And if you want to, you can make more touch-ups to some of these distant ships. I think maybe they ought to be a little bit deeper, browner. There's some of the warmth of the sun and the sky is going to be shining onto that, so that's going to neutralize the cool of the blue. But maybe not that much. Maybe I need a little bit more blue on top of that. You can kind of layer things, but don't overdo it. Especially don't want to create any puddles where you just go over the same spot over and over again and keep it too wet. Or as the water soaks into the paper, you don't want it to get so wet that it rips. But you can make any other little touch-ups you want. Maybe I'm going to add some little green strokes into the ocean here. Make it feel a little more alive with some green. Kind of like that. Anyway, when you're done, the last step will be to sign your name. I'll do that by getting a mostly dry brush. And down here in the bottom left corner is where Claude Monet signed his name on his version. So what I'm going to do is really stir up this black. And I'm going to sign mine Mr. New. There we go. Don't forget to clean your brush before putting it back, and dry your brush before putting it back into the tray. And there is our very own Impression Sunrise.